pick up a phone. How do you
Yes.
pick up a phone? And then he just couldn't make a call for 10 years? I mean, after that, like what? What? Well,
I don't know what.
that's why I think Rob is not being a completely candid here, because I think he did want to leave Judas Priest. Maybe he regretted it afterwards, and he's kind of backfilling the story about, oh, well, it was this confusion over a fax and blah, blah, blah. And because it just comes off as.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, where we discuss books by and about musicians and the music business. I'm Dave, and on this episode, me and my co-hosts Shelley and Jen are entering the confessional. Well, not really, but Rob Halford definitely does. This month, we are reading Confess by the metal god Rob Halford, lead singer of heavy metal legends Judas Priest. Judas Priest is one of the most popular heavy metal bands of all time. Since its formation in 1972, the band has sold tens of millions of albums and performed in front of millions of fans all around the world. Songs like Breaking the Law, You've Got Another Thing Coming, and Living After Midnight serve as the blueprint for modern heavy metal music. Halford was raised in a small factory town near Birmingham in post-World War II England. As a teenager, he became obsessed with rock music and showed a talent for singing. But Rob had a secret that he shared with almost no one back in those days. He is gay. Being gay in the 1960s and 70s was difficult enough, but being the frontman for a heavy metal band made being his true self nearly impossible in those days. In Confess, Halford tells the tale of becoming one of the most successful rock stars in the world while hiding his true identity from fans and the media. And then it all changed. In an interview in the late 90s, Rob came out on national television. Despite the risks, coming out proved to be the best thing for Rob. The fans were accepting, the media was supportive, and Rob maintained his status as the metal god. Now here's our content warning, friends. There are some very sensitive adult topics discussed in this video. It is definitely not safe for work and definitely not safe for kids. Please make sure to watch this in the appropriate setting. Thank you so much. Hey everybody, welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, episode 12. I'm here, it's me, your friend Dave, with Shelley and Jen, and this month we are doing Confess by the metal god himself, Rob Halford, lead singer of Judas Priest. Let me give you a little bit of a background on our author, Rob Halford, okay? Rob Halford is the lead singer of Judas Priest, one of the most successful heavy metal bands in music history. They've sold over 100 million albums, played in almost every country that has electricity. They started off as a small town band from England. They ended up conquering the entire world. One of the key ingredients of Judas Priest's identity was that they actually embraced heavy metal. They wore black leather. They had like chains. They had whips. They had a motorcycle. That was them. They started that thing. And there was hard rock before that. Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, Aerosmith. Judas Priest was heavy metal. There was a difference, and they embraced that, and that's why they're so revered in that world. He did leave Judas Priest at one point in the early 90s. He was gone for about a decade. They went on without him with a different singer, but ultimately he came back, and he has been with Judas Priest the entire time. Halford is one of the most successful singers in the history of music and carried a big secret throughout his entire professional life, which was that he was gay and had to keep that in the closet throughout his career up until about the late 90s when he finally came out. So that's the history of Rob Halford. That's the history of Judas Priest a little bit. An abridged history. I did do a playlist, and we'll link that below. I picked out my 20 favorite Judas Priest tracks, and it will be linked below Apple and Spotify. For those who are unfamiliar, I didn't go too deep, and I didn't try to go too extreme or whatever. You got your Breaking the Laws, your Living After Midnight, You Got Another Thing Coming, that kind of stuff is on there. What were your impressions of Rob Halford prior to reading the book? Shelley?
I'm going to say I had none. I've never listened to Judas Priest. I did. If you would have asked me who the lead singer of Judas Priest was, I would have said I have no idea. And that about sums it up.
So no impressions whatsoever, Jen?
No, I am
Oh,
not a metal god, nor did I know anything of the metal god.
you've at least heard you've got another thing coming, though, or,
Sure, yeah, I've
yeah,
heard their music. I'm aware of the band. Yes, but
that's about
that's
the
about
extent of
it.
it, though. I gotcha.
Hmm.
I gotcha. Okay, Jen?
I will say I've definitely heard of the band. I'm familiar with them. It's not specifically my genre, but I don't hate them. But I didn't know much about him at all. And I'm glad that I know more.
Yeah.
So you've got
Okay.
another thing coming.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's
my
what happened.
impressions are I've been a Judas Priest fan since I was a teenage metal kid. I can't say they were one of my favorite bands of all time or anything. I mean, I liked them in the 80s and then I kind of like them again now. But I mean, if you look at my playlist, it kind of cuts off about 1988. Really, because I'm not super familiar with their stuff beyond that. They've been making albums, including one they put out last year. I'm just not familiar with it, and I'm comfortable with that. Like, I like the old stuff. It's fun. It's a throwback. It's very, reminds me of being a teenager and all that. But I don't really need to go forward. Let's tackle his early days in factory town like Birmingham, Warsaw, and that kind of lower middle class upbringing that Rob had.
I also feel like we should clarify the Warsaw issue we were talking about
Yeah.
before we started recording. So
Yeah. So I looked it up. Okay. And Warsaw is spelled Walsall. Walsall.
Well,
But
yeah.
you hear Rob in the book when he reads it saying it sounds like he says Warsaw.
and I'm guessing that's part of it's his accent,
Right.
that it's like he's not saying Warsaw, but Walsall in
In
British
their
accent
accent. And then
sounds
the
to
way
us Americans like Warsaw.
Warsaw. And the
So
way and he has further, because he talks about it, people in his part of England, they're like, was it yam yam or whatever is the term? Like they
yeah,
speak a certain way and you know where they're from. And so maybe he's saying it with this yam yamish accent to it. So that's why he says Warsaw. But if I say Warsaw, I'm just saying it because that's how I heard Rob say it. So I'm going with that route. I'm not going to pronounce it like an American. I'm going to pronounce it with the full yam yam and go Warsaw.
yeah, we can be a united front on that. I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So he grew up in the 50s and 60s as a child in small town England. Warsaw is near Birmingham. Birmingham is known for factories. It's where Black Sabbath came from. It's where Judas Priest came from. And it is seemingly a pretty dingy existence. Like he described how there was so much soot in the air from all of the factory work and all of the smoke and the shit that they just throw out into the air. I'm sure half of them have lung cancer now from the stuff they breathed back at that time. And like that was the life that most of those kids grew up with. It was like he said heavy metal was a part of his life because when the factories were going at full steam, it would shake their schoolroom in school.
Wow.
Like with banging machines would shake their desks and stuff. So it was like he had that heavy metalness or whatever put into him at a very young age. But he didn't have a lot of options growing up. It seemed like most of these kids that he knew that he was growing up with, his friends and whatnot, were destined for this sort of factory existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, until then, the beginning of his music career, which, well, I'll call it the beginning. I think he maybe did too. When he's in class and they're singing,
That's right.
and he sings this song, and the teacher's like, wait, sing that again.
Yeah.
And he sings it beautifully. And all the kids are like, wow. And they clap for him. And he says that's when he got the first like taste of fame and attention. And then I loved it how the teacher not only made him sing it again for the class, but then like trotted him off to another class or maybe the music teacher and was like, okay, sing it again. But he had no idea why they kept telling him to sing it.
Right. Right.
And it was because it was so good. So that's kind of
and he
where
had
the
no
metal
nerves
god
about
began.
right, and he had no nerves about doing it. He's just like, okay, I'll just go
Yeah,
sing
it's
in
just
front of the school or whatever, a bunch of kids I don't know or whatever. So, yeah, I would say that was his first musical experience. That must have implanted something in his brain, like, oh, I like this. You know,
hmm
maybe he wasn't fully formed because he did go into the theater, and that was kind of where he got his first taste of show business and that kind of thing was in the theater.
He had a way in. So, I believe his dad was friends with someone that was there, or that as time went
Right.
on. And got
But
in
it
there, but
was his
that didn't
dad.
end so well.
That was a double-edged sword, I was going to say. He started working in the theater. His father had a friend who was in the theater and who helped Rob get a job. But unbeknownst to Rob's dad, we would assume this guy was not only gay, but was a predator who took advantage of Rob, did help him and get him in the theater, sure. But I mean, he also took advantage of his friend's teenage son and made a move. And I asked the question, that that did happen to him a number of times in the book. He talks about it. There were a couple of
yeah.
experiences like that when he was young. And I'm wondering if that was the norm for these times. I mean, none of us would know. We don't have firsthand experience of being gay in the 60s. But I mean, I'm wondering if that was something that just sort of happened. Like these older gay guys, these borderline predators or predators, they have their gaydar so finely tuned that when they see a 14 or 15-year-old that's confused or struggling or whatever, they go in for the kill, right? They figure out who this person is. And so unfortunately, a lot of these kids' first experiences is basically being assaulted, and they don't seem to understand that that's necessarily what happens. But that was the double-edged sword. But I don't even think he was out at the theater, was he?
No.
No, I just think that guy just assaulted him because he knew, well, this kid is probably gay.
Or
Yeah.
he just had access to him. I
Right.
mean, so there's two different assaults described. One is the friend of the father who takes advantage of him. And then there was also was it like a teacher at a camp, right? That,
No, there was some like work program or something,
or
I
yeah,
think, and all the kids had to go to it, and the guy just groped and assaulted all of them pretty much.
yeah. So like all the boys had experiences with this horrible piece of shit predator. Um, it wasn't just, I mean, it didn't have anything to do with the boys. It had to do with this guy
God,
being a
yeah.
piece of shit.
But Rob did not want his dad to ever know that happened. And he said he would not,
Yeah.
he even said he wouldn't have even admitted it if his dad were still alive and he were writing this book, that he wouldn't have
Yeah.
mentioned it. Because he
Which,
didn't want
like,
his dad to
what a
feel badly about it. But
terrible, what a terrible thing to have to carry around with you your whole entire life. Just awful.
yeah, pretty bad.
And also for that to for that to be his first sexual experience. I mean, Jesus, that's just rough. So rough. While we're on the topic of gay experiences, so there's a part in the book, I know you guys will remember it, where he's talking about how like him and his first exposure to masturbation
Oh, yeah.
was this like slightly older kid. I'm curious of how much older. I don't think he said. I think he just said he was a little older than us. Came up to his friend group and said, "Hey, do you guys want to learn how to feel really, really good?" And they're like, "Sure." And the kid just like whips it out and starts jerking it. And they're all like, okay. And so then it basically just becomes this like circle jerk, right? And so, which, whatever. But so then he's like, oh, yeah. Then I was like I was like
Right.
jerking off every chance I got. But also, like, when me and my friends were just bored, we just like give each other handies.
Right.
And he makes a point of saying like that those friends weren't gay. That was just sort of like what they did, And so no judgment whatsoever here.
Right.
But it did make me ask one of my friends, guy friends. I was like, okay, So you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. But like, this is the story that I just read in Rob Halford's book. Is this like a thing? Like, is this like how it works for dudes? And I just never knew it. Like, is that just kind of like what you do when you're bored? And he was like, uh, no,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. And I was like, it's okay if it was. And he was just like, it was not for me at least.
Yeah, speaking as someone who grew up as a boy in the 70s, I never had any experience like that. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a little curiosity about sex, but it's more like you ask questions. I never remember any friend whipping it out and being like, I mean, that just never happened in my world, but I'm not saying it didn't happen for others. I'm just saying I never experienced that personally. We move up to Rob's teenage years. He becomes obsessed with music. He's listening to Led Zeppelin. He's listening to Black Sabbath. He's listening to The Who. He's listening to Deep Purple. Falling in love with music. He has this great opportunity in the fact that his sister is dating a guy named Ian Hill, who happens to be the bass player for a band called Judas Priest. Judas Priest is looking for a new singer. He convinces his sister to ask the boyfriend, can you get me an audition in the band? And the rest is history. I mean, now he becomes the metal god, like he was the greatest singer in the history of heavy metal.
Well, didn't she suggest that he do it?
Did she?
Or maybe she made him aware of the opportunity and he was like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'll say about Rob and even young Rob growing up and going to that audition, he was very confident in his ability to sing. That didn't seem to be a huge issue for him. I mean, he really didn't have a whole lot of self-doubt about that.
It was like it was innate in him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He just did it, and it's something he did well.
And reflecting back to that thing in school where he sang and all of a sudden people were like perked up and were like, whoa, okay, this kid's good. And obviously he must have had that in his back pocket. And when he figured out a great way to apply it was this cool band, Judas Priest, is looking for a singer. And, now I'm going to jump in and do it. Rob was gay in this band in the 1970s when he joined in like 1972 or something like that, 73. And he didn't officially come out until the late 90s. He says in the book that the guys always said, well, we always knew, Rob, we knew you were gay, whether he said it or not. I'm wondering, do we think that's actually accurate, that they did always know? Or I'm wondering what you guys thought.
Of course they knew.
Yeah.
And they were respectful. And it was just, Rob, you do you. Get out there and sing. I think that there was a lot of respect for the band. Didn't really seem to have a lot of drama, but we can get into that later. There was a little here and there, obviously, because it's a band. But
yeah,
I think that they respected him and they knew what he brought to them. And, it was okay.
I think also what might have tipped him off is that he would bring dudes along with him on tour.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That seems like
maybe
it
my friend, my assistant,
Yeah, this is like I met this guy last week and he's going to be touring with us for the next 3 months.
So yeah, I would say definitely that sure. They knew, maybe not all along, but from a pretty early point, especially once they started traveling together, because maybe when you're still going home every night to your own place, maybe you still might not know what everyone else is doing all the time. But once you start living together and being a band full time, you kind of know. Do we think that Rob had any other choice than to spend most of his career in the closet? Like, I know nowadays, using our current sensibilities, we think that seems so harsh to say, maybe you should have. Considering we know how hard that was. But at the same time, if he had come out in 1978, would we even know who Judas Priest was? Would that have actually destroyed their career? Would he have had to be fired? Would it, I'm voting for, not that this is my preference, but I think he had to do that in order to succeed. And as difficult as that was, I think ultimately, putting that as front and center. I want to succeed. I want this band to work. I don't want to ruin it for anyone else. I don't want them to be harmed by this. I'm going to be quiet about it.
Okay. I had some thoughts on this. I think if he would have earlier, I don't think it would have hurt to how how it would be expected to hurt. I don't know. I think their sound is so unique, and I think that they were such, I don't want to use the word trailblazers, but they were such leaders in that whole metal, the heavy metal situation. I think it would have been received just a little bit better than we would all expect it to be. If that makes any sense. I don't
I
know.
mean, when you think of gay rock stars from that era, the two that come to mind are Elton John and Freddie Mercury, and both of them were very vague until a certain point. Like Elton John was the only one who publicly sort of even acknowledged that he was bisexual, maybe. Freddie Mercury never talked about it until the end. And those are the two most high profile sort of gay rock stars. So even they were sort of lukewarm about talking about it because they didn't want it to damage their career. They knew that there would be backlash. I mean, I'm just remembering the times. I mean, when I was in the heavy metal scene in the 80s, nobody was talking about Rob Halford being gay. I mean, it just wasn't a subject. But if it were brought in and people knew for sure, I can't say that the band might have survived. I mean, look, maybe I'm not giving these folks enough credit, but I just remember how it was in the 80s. I mean, calling someone wasn't even like considered like a big deal. That was just like, so what? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe I'm giving
Yeah.
too much credit. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it did ultimately happen, when he came out, the fans were remarkably receptive, but it was also the late 90s too. It was a different era by
Yeah,
that
still
point.
a
So
tough era
still
back
a
then.
difficult era. Still, it was very difficult to do and posed a huge risk to his career coming back, but no risk, no reward. I mean, you had to do it. But as far as being like in the 70s at the peak of Judas Priest, say 1980, 81, 82, when they were riding the highest of highs, I think it would have destroyed their career. So it's much as it sucks to say, like he did have no choice. I mean, it was either going to be, I'm going to come out and I'm still going to get shit on and my career's maybe not going to, but I'm going to ruin it for other people. And I think that was what he was more worried about was I'm going to be taking down these other four guys as well.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just me, it's these people too. And I think that was what was weighing on him the most.
I think,
Right.
yeah, there's so many factors at play. There's the pressure on him personally to come out to everyone he knows, because it's not like you're just coming out to your family. Like, when he came out to literally everyone. There's the risk to the members of the band. There's the risk to their careers, also to his relationship with them. I mean, there's so many things that were in the balance, that were in jeopardy, that I think it would be so incredibly hard to do it. I don't know if it's even a question. Like, I don't know that where we were in society would have even really let him. Like, that would have been a risk that not many people would probably take, unfortunately.
I mean, Boy George didn't say he was gay in the 80s.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right?
And
I
he
mean,
wore makeup.
right.
Like,
He wore
I love
makeup. He
that
clearly
pretty
was.
lady.
He
She's
was.
so pretty.
He was dating the drummer. You know what I mean, Boy George. So it's like, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If even he wasn't comfortable talking about it in the 80s, you're certainly not, because he was worried about acceptance in a community that might have been much more accepting, and in that pop
Yeah.
or whatever. But no, he was. I mean, again, it sucks to say, but I mean, I from my experience in that world, I think that would have been too damaging for him, because it would have been a scandal. Remember, in the 80s,
Yeah.
being gay was a scandal. It was
Yeah.
for the gossip pages, and it was like a gotcha thing. We caught you being gay, and
Right.
so there would have been that angle attached to it as well. So I don't think he could have come through. And in fact, I think it's interesting that he even had any hints in songs at all, like the song "Raw Deal," which references Fire Island, and he did that in the 70s, and he thought the band would understand what that meant, and they didn't. He had that song "Jawbreaker," which is obviously about a guy with a huge dick. These sort of things, and like people didn't figure that out when he was singing these songs back in the day.
But you look at like Bowie, Mick Jagger. I mean, I know it's not necessarily in the same genre, but there were always rumors and insinuations and questions surrounding all of that. But that was kind of more of a glam rock thing. So,
Yeah.
I think if
Yeah.
this was if he came out, who knows? I think it wouldn't have been as bad as everyone is thinking.
I think genre does, like musical genre does play a role though, because heavy metal is considered very masculine. Like glam rock is not.
well, the
Like pop
masculine.
rock is not like, but metal is like,
No, I
dude,
mean,
if you want to be a fucking man, you listen to metal,
yeah, yeah. No,
like
it's a different vibe. Have you guys ever seen Heavy Metal Parking Lot?
I was just gonna bring that up.
Okay.
No.
So there's this thing called Heavy Metal Parking Lot. It's like a 15-minute movie made in the 80s at a Judas Priest concert in like 1985. And it's just focusing on the fans out in the crowd, the Hessians, the burnouts, the whatever. And when they're talking about stuff, they go to one girl, like, what do you think of Rob Halford? And she goes, oh, I'd jump his bones, whatever they're doing.
I jump his bones.
Yeah,
Kind
I
of
was
80s
gonna
stuff.
say that exact same thing.
But then there's one guy who goes, Rob Halford, I don't know about you, dude.
Everybody else, you're rocking. Robert Halford, I don't know about you, but everybody else, you're definitely dynamite.
And I was like, that guy was Nostra fucking Damas back in 1985. Because there was never a hint of that. And he was like, I don't know about you, dude. But that was the only hint of it that I've ever seen in my entire life from that period. Some of Rob's earliest relationships, David was the guy who was with, there was Brad, there were some others who Rob sort of acknowledged after a while these weren't like really healthy relationships. And he said these guys weren't even gay, that they were straight guys who made an exception for Rob Halford. Now, I'm here to state that I can't speak for everyone, but I don't think that's how it works. I don't think you're straight with exceptions, but I'm curious because I didn't think that those guys were straight guys. I think that some of those guys were confused. Maybe the David guy was a straight guy, but Brad, who he met at a bar, and they immediately started hooking up with this passionate thing. I'm sorry, guys who are not gay don't engage in that. I mean, the guy was very least bisexual. But I'm wondering what you guys thought, because Rob dismissed all of his early relationships as those were straight guys. I don't know if I agree with that.
I have to say, I felt bad for Rob because it felt like he took ownership that he didn't need to take over it. Like what you just said, like they were straight, but like because of me, they like had these, whatever, this other experience. And I genuinely don't think it had anything to do with Rob. I think it had everything to do with those guys.
Yeah,
because
same.
like, again, going back to, how completely closed-minded our society was at that point, like those guys were never going to come out. They're never going to like say I'm bisexual or I'm gay because they didn't want to. They weren't ready. And so it seems to me like it's a safety mechanism to tell Rob, like, it's just you. But
Right.
I find it really hard to believe it was just Rob.
And this guy so-and-so was seeing a woman or had a baby with a woman or whatever, it's like, yeah, because they were still pursuing this idea that they were straight. I mean, that's what I'm
or
saying.
they were bi,
They were bi, but they did not want that out. It was the 1980s or the 1970s or 1990s or whatever, and they were not comfortable with that thing. But yeah, to say that they were 100% straight, who made an exception for Rob Halford, I think is ridiculous. I don't believe that, but Rob can believe whatever he wants. He knew those people. I think the fact that the one guy, Brad, who ended up taking his own life, I think that was a massive conflict within him. On the one hand, he's about to have a baby with this woman. He's got this situation with Rob. He is in fact gay and he doesn't want to be. And that's what the situation was. It's not that he was straight. And, I just, that's my feeling on it, was that was the guy's torture. It's sad. It's beyond sad. That experience.
With Brad, I think Brad was kind of an opportunist. You're dating a rock star, you're going to all these fun places. He's buying you bags of Coke. He bought you, didn't he buy him a place to live, or he found him a place?
Yeah.
I mean,
Got him an apartment. Yeah.
Brad might just be a good old grifter, just kind of going wherever he can get by. Woman, man,
I mean,
coke.
he could be, and that would just make him a hustler and like,
Yeah,
just sort of
absolutely.
like, I'll do whatever just because, if this person's paying me, then that's my scene or
Well,
what have
yeah,
you.
and
Um,
just an opportunist. But I think with David, he's the one that they were always in
they were
touch,
always
right?
hanging out.
They were like best friends. Yeah.
Right. They
Yeah,
were like best
absolutely.
buddies, and he was always disappointed. Well, it never turned physical here, or I started to do something and then he wasn't interested. And like, I feel like if there's any confusion about that and he's going to the guest room to sleep, like, I feel like you've got your answer there. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
he may not have been gay, just maybe was willing to try. I don't know, but I still
But they
think it's a
never really
bisexual
hooked
No,
thing.
up.
they never did anything,
Yeah, it
really.
was. Yeah, I don't think it was anything serious, but I think it was mildly physical, just like the guy wasn't that interested. And he also had no experience. Like, what did he know from relationships
Yeah.
personally? I
Yeah,
mean,
that was, yeah.
his entire thing was secretive. He had that book that he found or whatever, like it was sort of like the yellow pages for gay stuff in the United States. So when he toured the United States, oh, you should go to this bookstore, or you should go to this bar, or you should go to this rest stop or whatever. Like, he had that. So he knew his thing, but that was his only experience with anything. I mean, he had no, so I guess he could be confused for not understanding the first like couple of times, but then like by that third guy who was the military guy who he pursued for a long time with through letters and stuff, and then eventually it turned into more of a relationship. And I'm saying that guy was gay all along. Like, I don't think that guy was straight. He just maybe was, I don't know. I'm
I
beating a
think
dead horse here. I'm continuing with the same.
I think anything that Rob told had to tell himself to kind of justify that hurt and that pain and why, he managed so long to be with, in these situations that really weren't ideal. He was never really treated that great by these guys. I mean, they provided the companionship. I think David was legit. I think David was okay. But I think with Brad, I just think anything he needed to say, it's not me, it's you. Right? That's what I think
Yeah.
got him through the
No,
day. I
David,
mean,
they were good. They were
maybe
really
the
good
day
friends.
before I got married.
Well,
Brad,
also, like, he didn't have many options. It
right.
was sort of like finding David, who he was attracted with and wanted to spend time with him one on one. That was a golden opportunity for him to even meet somebody who was maybe possibly gay. And I think that's part of why he held on to that hope for him so long, is because it's not like he was going out in public and like meeting at that point, at least in
Right.
his life. He didn't have a gay community. He didn't have opportunities to go out and find another person that could offer him more than David did. He kind
And
of had to settle for David. And then
right. And
Brad,
David was also somebody who knew he was gay and didn't care. And that was
yeah,
at a time where Rob couldn't tell that to anybody.
right.
I think that's a big part of it. It was just like, okay, maybe we're not having a relationship. I'm not having sex with you. I'm not doing any of these other things, but you know who I am, and I don't have to hide when I'm around. They were drinking buddies,
Mhm.
large part. I mean, they
Yeah,
drank together all the time.
right.
They got pissed, as they say.
Yeah, they got tips.
Well, and they provided each other with the companionship and, you know, whatever filled that void for the loneliness and, the bar stool seemed to work with them.
Because it's either that or hooking up with random dudes at the fucking rest stops, which was insane. That he's one of the biggest rock stars in the world, and he gets somebody to drive him out to some remote rest stop, and he'll sit there in the toilet waiting for some guy to like give the secret nod or whatever, and then stick his dick through a hole. I mean, it's just like, Jesus Christ, man. That was, I mean, and he could be exposed so easily because
Yeah,
he's
Never
a
was.
really famous person.
I was just
yeah,
going to talk about that. I mean, his time with these dudes and whoever he met in a bathroom, it seemed to be fairly guarded. Now in this day and age, no way.
Oh, with a
oh
camera,
yeah,
camera
no,
phone.
that
Come
should be
on.
on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok in
Oh,
5
they would
seconds.
have been selling that stuff to the Daily Mail.
Well, and he described
no,
how the code was, the way it worked was.
TMZ would suddenly hang out in so many more bathrooms.
Oh yeah. Because he had his George Michael moment. He did get arrested at one point for doing that. Later on when he was,
They
I think
let
he
him
was
go.
already out of Judas Priest. But this thing was the funniest part. I mean, it's not even that funny, but I mean, when he was doing that and he met up with some guy at a rest stop and they kind of did each other to the extent that they did. But the code was you weren't supposed to. One guy left, and then the other guy waited for a few minutes, and then you leave, so you don't actually see who it was. And this guy jumped out right away and saw it was Rob Halford, and he was wearing all these Judas Priest T-shirts and stuff, like he'd just been at the concert. It was just like, oh,
And Rob, I love it. Rob is such a cheeky bloke.
Yeah.
he like
Thank
looks
you.
in the mirror at him and he goes,
Yeah. Like, see you next
"Yup,
time.
it's
See him
me."
next to her.
And just like walks out. I'm like, that's cool as fuck, man. Like, just unbothered, just like, yup, you just got it from me later.
Yep. And you think you knew Judas Priest. Now you really do.
First of all, Brad was like his first, sort of real relationship. He's this super charismatic guy. They hook up immediately. And Brad gives Rob this pair of underwear. I am not familiar with this kind of underwear, but Rob says it was very popular at that time for gay men to wear underwear that had clasps on each side so that, I don't know, you could like rip them off or something. I'm not sure. Sounds kind of hot.
That's probably what it is. Yeah.
But so he tells us this detail early on, and we don't learn why it's important until later, which I'm about to get to. But Brad really was like a meaningful relationship to Rob. I think they truly loved each other, even though Brad had, and Rob both had addiction issues. Brad, might have been bi or confused about his sexuality. He wasn't necessarily faithful to Rob. There were complicated factors between the two of them, but they did really love each other a lot. And so when Brad took his own life, Rob had been there. Brad got violent with him and with Rob and his friend. They got scared. They left. Brad ran out and told him, "I'll always love you." And then that's when he took his own life. And that was incredibly traumatic for Rob. And everyone who knew the man, obviously.
Story.
But I was like, were you just heartbroken? Like,
yeah, that was a tough section.
Yeah.
And Rob still, as of the writing of the book, has not seen his grave. He was touring somewhere during the funeral and has not been able to bring himself to visit Brad's grave. I mean, that's what a huge loss it was for him. And it's just, it completely broke my heart. But then years later, he's in a bar in Miami with, I think it was Gigi, who was also the person that he had left Brad's house with.
Oh, right.
Prior to his death. And they're at a club dancing and decide to go off into the side room so they can talk. And there's a Jamaican woman there. And she tells them she's a psychic. And Rob's about to and she says, "Who do you want to talk with?" And Rob's about to tell her, like, make some cheeky bloke joke about, like, I don't know, I want to talk to Jesus or something to completely blow her off. And she says, "Well, there's someone who wants to talk to you. And he wants me to ask you, do you still have the underwear with the clips on the sides?" And Rob is like blown away because he has never, ever, ever told anyone the detail about the underwear. And then the woman goes on to say all these other things that Brad would know and no one else would. And I just got goosebumps during that part. It was like, oh my God, is it real?
I love stuff like that.
I think they did. I mean,
he was like a grifter with a heart of gold, and they really connected. They really did.
I believe so. I mean, I believe so. Rob did have a lot of problems at that same time. He was drinking himself to death
Oof.
He ended up going to rehab and stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, just pretty much complete. And he said he never went to AA meetings or anything like that. He did do a stint in rehab and he's never done it again. And then he
Isn't it-
talks about his career, about how he'd never even sung sober. Like they
Yeah.
started making that album Turbo and he was drunk when he wrote all the lyrics. Then he went to go to rehab and then he came back and he had to sing them. And it was funny because he was kind of making fun of how dumb they were when the lyrics were because he was drunk and stuff. But he'd never actually sang sober before. And, fortunately, he was able to pull it off and do a great job. But it was like, yeah, he had to come to terms with that because he had hepatitis, I think is what it was when he had to stop for a little while because he was going so
like
hard.
6 months. Yeah.
For drinking. And the stuff with Brad where they were just had the Coke dealer on speed dial and the guy would just come over with just mountains of Coke every couple of days or whatever. I mean, he was pretty hardcore into drugs too. I mean, the other guys were like, your skin is gray or something. I mean, whoa,
I honestly, I can't believe from all of that drinking, that like he made it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was pretty extreme drinking. Yeah, that was a lot. Because he was just like, dude, we were getting pissed every single day.
I do think it's funny though that they're like, hey, is Mr. Drug Dealer there? And they're like, call back in 20 minutes. And they're like, fuck.
Yeah.
Hey, is Mr. Drug Dealer there? Call back in 20 minutes. Fuck. And then he's like, we probably did that for 2 hours. I'm like, you gotta find a backup, bro. Like,
yeah. And at the level of business that they're doing, they should get that shit delivered. They should be stopping by every day. What do you need, sir?
Yeah.
What do you need, Rob?
That's just bad business.
But drug dealers aren't known for being the best, having the best business acumen.
The greatest business minds.
No, not necessarily.
Another thing I wanted to say about Rob's addiction and quitting drinking that I'm surprised about it. One thing is that he never did it again. Like that is so impressive and difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
And
never
relapse. Like it was
not
just
a single
easy
relapse
for him. Like, he's like, I still take every single day, one day at a time. So that was incredible. Like, dude, you are a badass. And number 2 is how much he talked about how much better his life became after he quit drinking. Because I think, most people would think, my life is over. I have to quit drinking. Like, what am I going to do? Like, this is what I do. This is what I like to do. And he experienced so many more beautiful things because he stopped. He said the first time he sang on stage sober, he got this incredible rush and feeling he had never felt that was better than anything, and he references several times, like, I would have never been able to do this, that, and the other if I had been drinking. It opened up so many more amazing opportunities for him and ways for him to lead and enjoy a much richer life than he would have if he hadn't quit drinking. And I just love it when authors write about those experiences because it really does feel like, I think, giving up a habit like that is so strong is the end of your life when really it can be the beginning of it all.
Yeah. And for his instrument, his voice, if he continued to drink, it would have deteriorated and gotten to a point where he really couldn't sing. And the fact that his voice is still as good as it is now in 2024 when we're recording this. I mean, he was just here in Omaha on tour a week and a half ago or something. He's still singing at a top level. He could not have done that if he hadn't quit drinking 35 years ago or something like that. Like,
yeah, no way. He wouldn't be alive.
In the late 80s, after Rob gets sober, Judas Priest is, doing really well. They go into the 90s. And then there's this part of the book that I have always been confused by is when Rob left Judas Priest. Like the way he describes it, it was like, oh, I just wanted to do a solo album. I didn't want to leave Priest, but somehow I had to send this fax to our manager saying I was leaving Priest, but I didn't really mean it. And I didn't want them to think I was. But then somehow it's like, dude, pick up a phone. How do you not
Yes.
pick up a fucking phone? These are guys you've known at that point for over 20 years. You can't just call the
Yes.
manager and be like,
Yeah.
hey, that fax, that was a mistake. I'm just taking a year off. I'm not. That part was so fishy. And then he just couldn't make a call for 10 years. I mean, after that, like what? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and then somehow the band found out. And it's like, you call the band and tell
Yeah.
them this is not what it means.
Yeah.
I am loyal to you and I will be back after this record.
It
Gave
just
him
seemed like
very bad advice.
you're the singer of this the most one of the most successful bands in the world, and you can't pick up a phone. Like there's confusion as to whether you're in the band or not. That just was like what? And then Judas Priest didn't even get another singer for 4 or 5 years. So clearly they were sitting there waiting to figure out like what the fuck is going on. Why didn't Rob call and make, it just like there's something there that he's leaving out that just because it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. But
Yeah.
also, and they could have called him too, to be
Right,
fair.
they could have called him.
Yeah, that made no sense to me either.
I mean, I can't believe, the amount of logistics that go into a band at that level, making an album, doing a world tour, all of that stuff. And they're just going to let it like a fax be like the end of it. Like no follow-up call, no, like, hey, what did you mean by this? Like, because they had business shit to sort out,
Well,
like,
Yeah.
Yes. Did they have a contract? Did they what were they in the middle of?
right. I mean, it just makes no sense. And I've read it twice now, and it still makes no sense. Rob's explanation for why he was out of the band, it just seemed like you're making mountains out of molehills. Like all you had to do is pick up the phone. A band at that level speaks to their management probably almost every day.
Well, and he was, just kind of so butthurt by everything.
Well, so
I don't know
that's why I think Rob is not being a completely candid here, because I think he did want to leave Judas Priest. Maybe he regretted it afterwards, and he's kind of backfilling the story about, oh, well, it was this confusion over a fax and blah, blah, blah. And because it just comes off as bullshit.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to be gullible in terms of autobiographies where I'm like, I believe everything you're telling me. This one, I was like, that doesn't seem right.
It just doesn't seem right. And
agreed.
Rob had a career outside of that. He had the band Fight. He had Two, which was kind of his industrial band. Then he kind of returned to his classic style with the band Halford. And that was his indicator. He really wanted to get the attention of Judas Priest. So they would say, hey, Rob, do you feel like coming back? I mean, again, this is the confusing part, because separated out, neither one of them did that well, right? Judas Priest with another singer didn't do very well. They were at a smaller level than they used to be. Halford was talking about how he was at a smaller level than he used to be when that band Two, and he said they went to do a show and they sold 12 tickets or something like that. And it was like, wow, isn't that the time maybe you call Judas Priest and be like, guys, but it was still another 5 years after that.
Well, but his brother-in-law, like Sue Bear,
in the band.
Yeah. Well, but I think they split up at some point. The sister.
Did, yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't really address it. But I kept saying the same thing where I'm like, it's your fucking brother-in-law. Like you can't.
Well, and I think he said he saw Ian at family functions every now and again, and that's the other thing.
Right.
That was the first time he saw him.
Right? Why didn't you mention it? And then they were at some party or something, and one of them, Glenn, was there, or KK Downing, or one of the guys was there, and they hadn't seen each other in years, and it was just like, oh, hey, buddy, whatever. And it was still years before they got back. So.
It's like, oh, darn, I forgot again to talk to them about that thing.
Yeah, we had that chat. I forgot to mention Judas Priest. God damn it, And if it had been the era with cell phones and people would have taken pictures of them together, it would have been on the internet the next day. Is Rob back in Judas Priest? It would have been a day.
Totally. Yeah.
Would have been
maybe that would have reminded him to have the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I should call those guys.
That's right.
I can text them now because it's 2020, whatever. We have more sophisticated phones. I could just text
hey,
this guy
that's a question that should have been on your agenda, Dave. If texting were available, would Judas Priest have broken up when they did?
Oh my God.
Or would they still be sending a fax?
Yeah.
Fax anymore?
The faxing.
Oh, dear God.
The paper, the noise.
Rob obviously did return to Judas Priest in the early 2000s. It was met with huge success. People were very happy. Sucks to be the other guy, Tim Ripper Owens, who came in and replaced Rob on those couple of records. But
Yeah.
I felt even he must have known this was going to happen someday. They've been making records since 2003, I think, and touring and whatever. There have been some lineup changes, though. Not everybody is still with Judas Priest, but Rob is, and Ian, his brother-in-law, is still there too.
Yeah.
Well, the band did not have a whole lot of drama. They really didn't.
No, I mean Rob talked about in terms of the only drama was squabbling between Ken and Glenn, the two guitar players. Like they used to squabble, and then he said it was nice not dealing with that when he was out of the band, but obviously he missed it. And I also think some of that conflict is great for creativity, you know? I mean, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards gone through periods where they barely spoke, and they made some great shit when they were barely talking to one another. So,
but Ken and Glenn, didn't they come to blows one night? They I think
they might have, yeah.
He was talking about how they just like build, and like one of them will just like fester on the comment, like, "Oh no, it's fine," and then like 2 days later, like he'll just run up,
just explode.
It's like the Real Housewives.
Yeah.
But they needed those three. It was Ken, Glenn, and Rob that wrote all of the classic Judas Priest songs. And like I said, I haven't heard their new stuff, so I can't speak for the new last couple records without those guys. I know Glenn apparently still participates, even though the Parkinson's is so severe, he can't really do that much. For a while there, he was coming out on encores, and like, so the other guy would play most of the show, and then he would come out and do an encore too. And that was that. Last time I saw him was when they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he looked like a walking ghost. Like I couldn't believe I don't think he was really even playing. I bet you his guitar wasn't even turned on because I don't think he could play. I mean, it was sad. I just, you know.
Well.
All right, so let's move on. The next thing was Thomas, basically his husband. Rob finally found a relationship that works. He's been with the same guy since, I don't know exactly when they met, but it's been over 20 years of the publishing of the book, which I think was 2021 or so when it came out. So they've been together for a long time. He finally found it. He has his relationship, and the guy travels with him at all times. And Rob says he couldn't do tours without him. You know, everything's come full circle. He's out. He's got his husband or his boyfriend or whatever with him at all times. Nobody seems to give a shit. Judas Priest is as successful as ever. And, I think I said something in the last video that I thought Rob Halford's coming out had a bigger effect than almost any other celebrity coming out. I mean, I would say maybe Ellen DeGeneres probably would be number one because she risked her entire career with that television show with the coming out episode. So she would maybe be number one, but Halford's got to be up there because he changed so many minds. I mean, there probably is still plenty of homophobia in the music business or in the heavy metal world, but there were a lot of people who were kind of like, wow, I can't really hate gay people if Rob Halford is gay, like, because he's so fucking cool or whatever. I love his music or this or that. I think he was a big factor towards gay acceptance, a big one in terms of celebrities, I would say.
He had a very there was a very healthy thought he had that I noticed, and he was talking about when he came out and how reactions were and such, and he's like, and people are like, we're not going to listen to your music again. He's like, that's fine, I don't want you to listen. Like, I think he was in a spot where he's like, screw you, I'm gay,
fine.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't like me, I don't care.
Someone else, like,
I also love how it wasn't this like, I'm going to make an announcement and I'm going to issue a press release and this like big deal. He's just on MTV. Was it Total Recall?
Some interview. Yeah. Some
TRL?
Interview show he was doing. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. And he just like said it.
Right.
He just said he's gay. And
he said, he goes, as you know, I've lived my whole life as a gay man. So he's out there saying like, you're doing these like attempt to get you questions. Like, I think that's what he was sort of doing. Because the
Oh,
guy,
yeah.
and then he was like, well, as you know, and then he just decided now's the moment. What was the biggest surprise or revelation in the book to you?
I would say for me, the biggest, I was very, the revelation was, I mean, he's a strong guy. I mean, he's mentally strong. And to literally go to rehab after drinking like that, after treating his body like that, and literally, I mean, what did he go for? 30 days, 60 days, whatever?
Very brief.
Yeah, it was brief and he never did it again. That was a revelation for me of how strong of a will he had and how impressed he was by the fact that he sounded freaking great and he felt great.
Yeah.
And I was impressed by that. You know, I'm sad he was taken advantage of. I mean, I wouldn't even call that so much a revelation. I would just call that, life. But I think the sobriety part was what I was, most revelationized by.
Shelley?
I think for me, it was how many encounters he had with pedophiles, honestly. The sexual assaults. I did not expect to read something like that. I think that's a brave thing to write about. Yeah, it just goes to show you that, yes, women have a higher incidence of sexual assault than men in general, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen to men or boys. And it's just so sad. And it's just, yeah, I just was very surprised by that. And I feel for him a lot for having those experiences.
I would say for me, it was kind of piggybacking on what you said, but not so much when he was a kid. There was one incident where he talked about where he was already a rock star, remember, and they were partying in New York with people from the record company. And some guys took Rob home and they must have known he was gay. They got him drunk and one of the record label people assaulted him basically at that time. And he was an adult rock star at this point, but it was against his will. That's not what he thought he was doing there, and whatever. And they pushed him too far. And it was like, so that was still happening to him. And he was like famous at that point, or closeted famous, but clearly these guys knew, so that was a rebel. I was just like, wow, holy shit.
And I think the thing that sucks is that the people who do it, it's sort of like we were talking about earlier, like they make it so vague, or they are in a position of power, or there's different reasons why people feel like they can't speak about these things that happen to them, and so they continue to happen. And that's and the fault there lies on the perpetrator, of course, not on the victim. But
Absolutely.
They construct these situations in which people don't know, like, did I do something? Like, was that my fault? Should I have done something different? Should I have drank less? Should I have blah 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 or whatever? And I think that's exactly why they do continue to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we don't think they do because men don't talk about those things as much.
Right. And there is also
our society's still getting its head around the fact that this shit can happen to men too, I think.
I think so. And also there's a little bit of homophobia in thinking, oh, were you really assaulted like that? I mean,
or men being like, I don't want somebody to think I'm gay.
Right. Does that really make it like assault against you? Like, come on. And I think that's a homophobic response.
I'd like to take a minute. I just want to say how much I admire Rob Halford for coming out, and how hard that must have been, even though he kind of made it look easy. What an incredible thing to do, to be the fucking metal god and to be like, I'm the metal god and I'm gay and it's the 90s. So yeah, that's because we were not nearly as accepting of other people in general at that time. So he's a badass and I love it. And I love that a message that you can take away from this book is that it does get better. Like we've heard that phrase, but like Rob Halford's life is an example of it gets better. He is in a loving, healthy relationship. His career has thrived. He gave up drugs and alcohol. Like, he's the man. And if you just like stick with the shit, it gets better. So yeah, I really love Rob Halford and admire him.
You know, I know your criticism of a lot of these books is these guys don't talk about where they're from, what they like, what got them to be where they, well, he does talk about
he does
that.
it all.
Hey, he loves that Joan Baez song. And when he met Joan Baez years later, she said to him, "Oh, Rob, I love that version of you." So there was a lot of that, like what I like about this, what I do, why I am the way, musically the way that I am.
Yeah. So I will say this book met all of my qualifications for an amazing rock star book. I mean, listen, he read it because I listened to my car because I'm in my car all the time. He sounds amazing. And like, it's just so funny. And just, I think listening to him specifically tell these stories, it was fantastic. And I think on top of that, I love the juice and the gossip. And he handcuffed himself to Andy Warhol, and he saw the toilets where Yoko and John went to the bathroom, and they had like his and her toilet bowls, intertwined with each other. And I mean, yuck. Ugh. But, I think there was tons and tons of juice. And, he didn't shy away from ever being himself when he met a celebrity.
And he also said he was a heavy metal gay Pop-Tart, right?
Yeah.
I love Pop-Tart. That was the best.
I think it's so funny how he got so excited about Cher, when they were on tour with Kiss and Cher was there and he just wanted to be around her, and then Madonna and Lady Gaga. And it's just like, 95% of the gay men that I've known in my life are all obsessed with those same people as well, but they're not the metal god, the singer of Judas Priest. You know what I mean? Like, I just found that so wild and so funny that he would get so excited about like Lady Gaga and Cher. Like, he just wanted to be around her and stuff. God, I thought that was funny.
Yeah. I think for what he does and how successful he is at it, he's got respect of so many people and all of these great artists. And, I think there's just little fun tidbits of all sorts of stuff. I mean, he really didn't have anything negative to say about anyone.
No, I think it was wasn't he in like Germany in some gay bar, and he kind of made eye contact with Freddie Mercury. It was like in there. And then he's like, "Oh, okay." But they didn't really talk or whatever. It's just kind of I see you, dude, and then it was like, that was it.
I think he was a little disappointed in his idol and that kind of coming face to face thing. And like, there's a part where he's talking to the Queen and he's like educating her on metal. I mean, this guy is he's awesome. This book is great. He talks about his influences. He talks about everything that happened. He talks about all of his relationships. And, I think sometimes with these books, the music becomes so much of the main focus of it. And, where I'm coming from, you get to see the bigger picture of everything, and you get some gossip and some dirt and some funny stuff. And I thought this was a great book. It got a little long for me, but I thought it was a great book.
I thought it was great too. And I loved it that not once, but twice he tried to shake the Queen's hand.
Yeah.
And they were like, "You do not do that."
You do not.
It's like, ooh, I would probably do that too. That'd be I'd screw that up right quick.
I feel like once he freed himself of, his big secret, he just was so much of himself, and he was awesome.
Yeah.
He's just a good dude. And I think sobriety, I mean, as hopefully it does for most people, absolutely was the best thing he could have done for himself.
Definitely.
I mean, obviously that happens, but for everything, for his voice, for his relationships, for his life. And he just came so much more into himself when he was sober.
Yeah, like those two hardest choices he made, getting sober and coming out, were ultimately what freed him to be the amazing person that he is.
Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah, I loved him too. I was like, I'm a huge Rob Halford fan now. He's awesome. He's so funny, like in a British way funny.
Yeah.
Not like dry, in a big
dry humor,
but in a like
dry humor
from a side, like he just inserts these little like little
Yeah,
nuggets, and you're like, oh,
And it's
Rob.
also so on our next book. What's our next book, Jen?
I'm very, very excited about this because I want to kind of get us off of our kind of, the genres of the Liz Fairs and my favorite addict Mark. And, I just kind of want to take us in a different direction and go way back to the late 60s. We're going to read about Sly Stone, and the book is called Thank You. So it's going to be fantastic. I would encourage anyone, if you have not seen The Summer of Soul, it's directed by Questlove.
Oh, yeah.
It is a documentary concert film of a music festival, the Harlem Cultural Festival, that went on in 1969. It was called the Black Woodstock, and it is absolutely incredible. It was held in a park in Harlem, and it was days and days of fashion, film, music, and you had the Staple Sisters, you had Sly and the Family Stone, you had Nina Simone, The Fifth Dimension, Stevie Wonder, David Ruffin. It was absolutely incredible. This film is beyond phenomenal. Check out the film. We're going to read the book. We're going to come back and talk about Sly, who basically infused rock, soul, jazz, funk, Latin music. He literally was the maker of, the stew.
He was
with
great.
everything.
Great guy.
It's going to be
All right,
awesome.
that sounds
Yeah,
very
I'm
interesting.
stoked.
Yeah, that
I
sounds
love
very
Sly and the Family
interesting
Stone.
and
Yeah.
different than what we've done in the past. So that's cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well then I guess
And finally, some POC representation, which we've
Yeah.
needed.
Yes.
So
in there.
great,
Yes.
great pick.
Yes. Thank you. I cannot wait.
Thank you for letting me
Yeah.
be myself again.
All right, and that's actually the full title. Thank you for letting me be myself again in his phonetic spelling. Because if you look how it's spelled,
Yeah. Is it
you know-
MICEELF?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many great
Funny
songs.
stuff.
I'm going to put together a set list. He's absolutely incredible. He's a character. He's brilliant. And we're just going to do a deep dive into Sly and the Family Stone.
Looking forward. That's what we got to look forward to
Killer.
next month. This was our 12th book. We're wrapping it up here for Confess by Rob Halford. I think this was a great one. I think we all kind of, I don't know what this book is definitely different than what your expectations would be if you were just a moderate Rob Halford fan, a non-Rob Halford fan. You didn't know anything about, whatever. It's like you come out the other end and this was just a really overwhelmingly positive book. I mean, it was just everything worked out for Rob. Great. It's perfect. So
I think if you liked Paul Stanley's book, you would like this book.
I agree.
Because they both have that whole thing of like, this is not the drug, sex, and rock and roll that you would expect. And there's some really good messages in it. And they're both just quality humans.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be like, put aside a bunch of their shitty behavior and then focus on the little thing that they're nice about.
Yeah.
They're good here, like in this little thing. But
nice. Yeah. Vince Neil wasn't nice about anything.
Yeah.
none of the
Not
Motley
an
Crue
ounce
guys
of
had any
Vince
redeemable
Neil.
characteristics. Yeah. Paul Stanley did, though. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. This has been a great one. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our videos, including, not limited to, the new stuff we're going to be doing in between videos. We are all three of us making a pledge to be better about that and to provide more to you fans of the Rock and Roll Book Club. But until that time, again, thanks again for watching.
Follow us on socials,
Exactly.
Facebook, Instagram. Find us.
Yep.
Thanks for joining.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.